Très bien, très bien. Ben, merci à tous d'être là. Donc John va vous faire quelques démonstrations de dessin. Et pour commencer, on s'est dit, we thought it would be great to start with one great character, which is Rorschach. Donc on va commencer avec le personnage de Watchmen que vous aimez tous. C'est notre préféré, c'est Rorschach en français. Donc je vais me mettre sur le côté.
Hello again. I don't usually draw like this in public. I don't, usually it's a darkened studio, not under bright lights and scrutiny. Thank God you're not my editors.
Oui, d'habitude, on ne dessine pas en public. On dessine dans une salle très noire, à l'abri des éditeurs.
One of the pleasures of working on Watchmen is learning from Dave. Dave is like a consummate artist, and he still is now. And all the shortcuts that Dave showed me, not short, sort of like professional shortcuts, I think. One thing I learned really early on is if you have a faceless character, you don't have to worry about eyes. One of the biggest problems, whenever you do a drawing, if any of you are artists, one of the things that you can do to check to see if you're doing a face straight on is just turn it round and look at it in the mirror. And if you're working under pressure of deadline, you sometimes don't get the opportunity to stop and look at what you're drawing. In fact, before I do Rorschach, I'll do a very quick sketch of John Constantine.
Donc juste avant de faire Rorschach, il va faire un sketch très rapide de John Constantine, Hellblazer.
One of the things I learned, as I say, very early on, working with Dave, is certain things you can do. And one of the things, probably if you talk to artists this weekend, is try and avoid drawing faces straight on. Because you have to balance things. Another thing you learn is you should not smoke, even though John Constantine does. But the great thing about smoke, and whatever you think about smoking, it looks wonderful when you light it from behind and you have a beautiful woman smoking. But other than that, you don't really want to smell it too closely because she smells the tobacco. But when I saw Dave doing Rorschach, I realized you don't need to balance eyes. If you look at sketchbooks, you will always see how they start drawings. They will section the face in this way. And the face breaks down into mathematical elements. The center of the eye tends to run straight down to the corners of the mouth. Two eyes should balance here. And that's actually not too bad. Usually I have one eye too high up and not very good if you're trying to do a face to make people believe it's a face. So balancing eyes, balancing proportions, it's always one of the hardest things to do. So the great thing about working on a character like Rorschach is you don't have any eyes to worry about. And another thing that I really enjoyed, am I talking too fast for you, David? You need to interpret?
Not at all. I think everybody is understanding. So.
One of the great things about working on Rorschach, as I said, there's no eyes. And another thing that I really enjoyed about Rorschach is Dave set the scene where he always tended to be in a rainy, miserable place. And rain is a great mood setter. And the great thing about rain, and this is another thing you should think about, is the bigger your felt tip is, the faster you can cover space.
Donc la pluie est un élément très intéressant pour les personnages, surtout comme Rorschach, qui vit principalement, hein, qui est dans les caniveaux, et ça permet de faire des choses très intéressantes au niveau de l'image. Ce qui est bien avec les gros marqueurs, c'est que ça peut noircir des grosses surfaces très vite.
So I've covered a lot of space there. And another good thing is the smell of the felt tip gets you a little bit high. Oop. Use a smaller felt tip to get in closer. Thing I like about doing, the weird thing about Rorschach is those strange moving blots on his face can make him look unhappy, angry, smiley. It really is a wonderful design. And I think that Dave created something, one, visually it looks quite stunning in a number of different ways. And it's like any mask. Masks always gives a sense of distance from the person behind the mask, and this can be quite chilling when you look into this strange blot face. And the concept of having someone who is slightly mad being the embodiment of the Rorschach test, as you know, is basically just like see what people see in abstract shapes. I think the concept is just incredible. I love it. And if you hadn't know, I'm very lucky because getting involved in the Watchmen as a comics fan, I am still a comics fan for Watchmen. Whereas Dave, to a certain extent, he struggled and worked over it. I mean, you talk to any comics artist, it's the writer to a certain extent, and I hope there's no writers in here that I'm going to upset. The writer has the easy job. The artist is the guy who has to interpret something. So if you sort of like say the whole Apache Nation comes over the hill, it takes you 5 seconds to write, the whole Apache Nation comes over the hill. You ask the artist to do that, ask John Giroux. You know, the whole Apache Nation going to take you 2 days, 3 days to draw coming over that damned hill. So the idea of like being able to, for me to come in as the colorist, which to a certain extent is a pretty easy job as well compared to what Dave had to do, is actually a very nice, I don't get sick and tired of doing these guys because I didn't have to do them every day for a year the way Dave did. And the great thing is he starts making sense. The more you take away from the white, the more Rorschach starts becoming that character that we know and hate and know and love. One of the things about all these different big felt tips is the fact that if you use different felt tips. They start sort of like fading, and once you know how they fade, you can start creating effects, graying effects, which gives a dimensionality to what you're doing. And a little bit of rendering brings something out in a way the pure line would take a lot longer to do.
Can you talk to us about the inspiration of this character, which is another character from Charlton Comics, I think, and it's way different because that one
was
is the question.
Was it Mr. Midnight or
the question? I think.
Oh, question, yeah. I mean, it's like I found it really fascinating when I found the Charlton characters were the basis for the Watchmen. The Charlton characters, I think, were based on either Marvel or DC characters. Charlton was trying to become a new Marvel or DC, but just didn't have the that back catalogue of characters like Superman, Batman, Spider-Man, and so on that Marvel and DC shared between them. So they basically went out of business, which is a real shame. I mean, competition is actually pretty good in any industry, and one, it gives artists opportunity to go from different company to different company. So the fact that like these characters are based on a set of derivative characters, I found what Dave and Alan did was just quite, original. They made the basis from where these characters came from. We have the Superman, obviously, we have the mystery character, we have like the Batman style character, we have like Wonder Woman and so on. The fact that sort of like they become something special because they've been immersed in this world that's like exists solely for those Watchmen characters, I found quite exhilarating to be involved in the whole thing. So having Rorschach in the rain is always a great thing. One of the things, Tipex is a great white outer in typing, but it's also going to be very helpful when you want to do rain. And I'm not scrubbing it out. This is actually rain in a graphic sense. And the great thing about white is the fact you can do little effects, so you can do bouncing raindrops.
Donc, ce qui est fantastique, c'est de dessiner donc là avec un Tipex qui est censé effacer normalement, entièrement effacer les choses, mais en fait ça devient un stylo, un feutre en lui-même.
And it tends to dry very fast, which is actually pretty cool. So you can just like shape the drip. So that is Rorschach.
La pluie fait tout. The rain make it all work in the end.
Would anyone like me to draw anything else?
Est-ce que quelqu'un a une suggestion de dessin?
Judge Dredd. I do Judge Dredd regularly. I don't know if you guys know Judge Dredd. Yeah. So I like doing Judge Dredd, and again,
Judge Dredd.
Judge Dredd is one of those characters that he's sort of like half as good to draw visually as Rorschach is, because he's half covered. So he's got a helmet on. And again, it's like it creates a sense of alienation. So I don't know if you've seen any cosplay judges around, but if you see those guys, and they really suddenly become quite intimidating. Because you can't see their eyes. The great thing about eyes is, that's where you look into people, you see the humor, you can depict so many things if you do eyes correctly. And that's the humanity in some ways, people is through their eyes.
Oui, c'est un personnage qui est assez intéressant puisque on ne voit jamais ses yeux. Il porte un casque tout le temps, enfin, sauf quand c'est Sylvester Stallone qui le joue. Et les yeux sont utilisés donc pour donner l'âme du personnage, pour qu'on puisse lire à l'intérieur. Et ce qui est incroyable avec ce personnage, que personnellement j'adore aussi, hein, dès la première fois où je l'ai vu, c'est que le fait qu'on ne voit pas ses yeux devient source à la fois de quelque chose de très, très violent, impitoyable, et parfois aussi, parce qu'on explore au cours des multiples aventures, et ça fait 40 ans que Judge Dredd existe, on explore plein de facettes de sa personnalité, et parfois il est presque humanisé, même si on continue à ne jamais voir son visage. D'ailleurs, il me semble me souvenir que même quand il se douche, il garde son casque. Like when he's taking a shower, he keeps his helmet on, right?
The thing, I was a comics, as I said before, I'm a comics fan. I got into 2000 AD because I was a fan. I wanted to draw Judge Dredd. And Brian Bolland, who I obviously worked with on The Killing Joke, and Mick McMahon were the two artists that really defined the character of Judge Dredd. And Judge Dredd almost like a cartoon. He's got a big stroppy lip. He looks like a 3-year-old who's very, very angry, but he's 6'6", so you wouldn't want to argue with him. But he's immediately recognizable. Someone told me once that's like to do the best sort of character, if you can do him in silhouette from behind and still recognize him, like Batman. He's the first one who springs to mind. You know who this character is. You see the profile of Judge Dredd, and you know who this character is immediately. You couldn't mistake him for anyone else. If you come to the convention, or the games convention tomorrow, there's Simon Bisley is going to be there. Simon Bisley is one of these artists that's appeared on the scene about 10 years after I'd been doing stuff. And he shook the whole place up because of his interpretation of some of these classic characters. If you see his Batman Judge Dredd crossover, it's just a phenomenal piece of work. And he shook the tree basically. He made Batman his own character. He made Judge Dredd his own character. But I go back to who I loved, which is Brian Bolland and Mick McMahon's characterization. I hope I've interpreted him slightly differently to anyone else. But when Simon Bisley came in, if you look at 2000 AD now, there's so many different interpretations of the same character. And in a way, I think that's probably what made the American market became quite wide open for British artists for a while, and probably more so for the writers. Alan Moore, Mark Millar, Grant Morrison, those guys was coming in with new ideas. The problem with the American system was the fact that they had these iconic characters they used constantly, and Batman would always fight the Joker and put him aside, it's like Arkham. Joker was always escape from Arkham and come and fight Batman again. The British writers and the Scottish writers in particular introduced things where it wasn't that simple and that straightforward. I mean, it's the question I'm asked sometimes, did Batman kill the Joker at the end of The Killing Joke? And for a lot of years, Batman didn't kill anyone. The fact is this murdering maniac would come out every couple of years and start mayhem in Gotham. It seems absurd. I don't believe in capital punishment in the real world, but then again, what would we do if we didn't have the Joker? So they could never kill off certain characters. So the great thing about people who do shake the tree every now and then, like Simon Bisley and Mark Millar in particular, about writing, is the fact you read that story, and Alan Moore. I mean, you had no idea who was going to survive at the end of Watchmen. And the great thing about being surprised in a comic is the fact that it suddenly becomes something other than a children's book. It becomes something that's a bit more profound. It's a proper novel, and be read and recognised as such. But doing Judge Dredd is just one of the pleasures. Every single time I do Judge Dredd, there's something new to discover about him. I just finished a series that was based on my character, Razorjack, and my created character, Razorjack, appears in the 2000 AD magazine with my favourite character of all time, which is Judge Dredd. And I am just blown away by the fact that it's like some character that I love so much, such as Judge Dredd, is appearing with something I created. If someone had told me this when I first started drawing Dredd X amount of years ago, I wouldn't have believed it. So if you get the opportunity to check out the magazine with my story in it, please do.
So what year did you start drawing Judge Dredd? I believe it was 1988. Je crois que c'est en 1988 que John a commencé à dessiner Dredd. You did the cover of an annual and the story in it, all painted.
Yeah, it was great. That was for me, 88 was a learning curve for me. It was a year that I felt I've actually achieved what I set out to achieve in comics. I knew how to tell a story. I knew how to paint a picture. And to actually be able to combine the two I felt 88 with the Judge Dredd annual was the year that I actually got it right for the first time, when I'd been working 3-4 years before that. I love fully painted work. I mean, I'm a painter by inclination, but I love storytelling. And the great thing about working in comics is I'm combining one illustration. I'm a better illustrator than I am a writer, should we say. So actually to combine those two loves is just, this is the best job in the world. If any of you guys aspire to be a comic artist or writer, I mean, anything creative is just one of the best things in the world to do. So it's really satisfying for me to come back to this character time and time again. Thankfully, I've kept up a standard that still appeals to the editors. One of the biggest problems of getting to a stage in your career where I've had a 30-year career is the fact they're always looking for the new kid on the block. So artists in this room are probably more likely to get a particular job than I am because they know who they're going to get with me. Whereas someone comes in new and can surprise the editors, can surprise the audience. And that's one of the greatest things about what we do. I love the fact that it's a precarious situation I'm going through. I love the fact that I'm always kept on my toes. I will never get complacent. I will always try harder. Every time I see another good artist over the next couple of days, I'm going to see some great European artists, some great British artists, and some great international artists. And I'm sure every single one of them are going to show me something new that I haven't seen before. And I'm going to try harder, and I'm going to get better. You should never sit back and think that's the best thing I've ever done. The next job you're going to do is the best thing you're going to do up to that point. But always make sure you're trying. Did you hear me swallow then? Wonder how loud it sounds. Right, I'll carry on doing this guy because I do love Dredd, and if I get him right. The good thing about this is whenever I'm doing sketches of Dredd or Rorschach at the conventions, the first one is either the worst of the day, and I don't tell that to the people who's just bought it until they've bought it. And then I'll tell them this is the best one I've ever done. But usually the last one I do is the best one I've ever done. Because a friend of mine used to say, you have to liberate the hand. I shared a studio with Steve Dillon, who worked on Preacher, and if you've not seen Preacher, you've got to get this collected edition. I'm sure it's been reprinted a number of times in France, all around the world. And there's, and I think it's a Netflix series, which is brilliant as well. And the thing that I love about Steve Dillon's work is the fact that, and what they've done with the Netflix series, is the fact that Some of the actors look like a cartoon that's like Steve Dillon has just drawn. It's just beautiful stuff. But working with Steve Dillon, one of the things he was said, because he's such a professional, he was an unbelievable artist because he started when he was 17. He was so sophisticated a comic artist at 17. I worked for about 10 years before I got to the standard that he was at 17. He just got better and better. And the stuff he does for Preacher is just one of the most satisfying stories I've ever seen. He could stop at the top left, start at the top of the left-hand page and work down to the bottom right-hand side of the page without stopping. He was just incredible. We had Jimmy Palmiotti come into the studios once when Steve was working on Punisher for Marvel Comics. The weird thing about like being a professional artist is you worry about where the next job's going to come from. The fact that like Watchmen and Preacher are both phenomenally successful books. Dave Gibbons said when he finished Preacher, he was just worried about where the next job was going to come from. And it's hard to believe there's something now when you look back and it was just worried the artist because he was self-employed, where's the next job going to come from? Luckily, it didn't take him long till he got to Give Me Liberty. And same with Steve Dillon. He was on the final 2 issues of Preacher, and he got offered this job to work on the Punisher. And he was actually trying to do sort of like 45 pages every single month. And that's an absurd amount of time to spend working. I mean, he didn't have weekends. I could sometimes turn up at the studios and he'd been working through the night. And he was a phenomenal artist when he burned himself out for a few years after that, actually. But remembers like the inker coming over, Jimmy Palmiotti. And he was sitting in the same studio as Steve. And it was taking him longer to ink a page of Steve's pencils. And that the inker should be a lot faster than the penciler, but Steve was penciling the pages so much faster than Jimmy could actually ink them. He was just a phenomenal artist. But he always used to talk about liberating the hand. And if you're a freelance artist, one of the clues, in fact, I think some writers have said the same thing. If you're writing a book, if you finish a sentence half the way through, so the next day you come in and you can finish off that sentence, you can kickstart the day. And I'm the same. If I finish a piece of work and I leave myself the easy bit to do the following day, it relaxes you into the job because you have to keep turning stuff around really fast. So this is sort of like liberating the hand. So tomorrow I'll be doing these so much better. So you got to see me tomorrow doing these. That's Judge Dredd. And so never throw away these big felt tips because you can always use them somewhere down the line. There he is.
Ce personnage est fantastique. On applaudit. Merci beaucoup, John. Thank you.
No, thank you. That it? Oh, question and answer, yeah. Cool. Have I finished drawing then?
Merci beaucoup. On va passer aux questions et réponses, le temps que John se réinstalle.
Yep. Can I take this with me? I feel so rock and roll. Oh, it's heavy metal. Heavy metal. That's heavy metal. Apparently. Yes, I'm back.
So it's great. Moi, j'adore le voir créer comme ça, à partir de rien. I love watching you going from white paper to a character which is on the page.
Oh, thank you.
So, je vais poser la première question. Did you feel a bit like God? Est-ce que tu te sens comme Dieu un peu quand tu crées when you create those characters, quand tu crées ces personnages comme ça? Does the artist feel like I am God? I can do whatever I want with those characters, and they only exist through my pen and stuff. Do you feel powerful doing all this stuff?
I feel like the devil. I think the great thing you move people around, and I think God hopefully should be benign and it's like treat them well. My characters always end up being either decapitated or abused in some way. So yeah, I think probably more the evil God.
Or you feel like the devil then.
It's
C'est
a
comme
little
le
bit.
diable un peu. Hein.
Only on paper though. I'm very, very nice in real life, I think.
Donc si vous avez des questions, n'hésitez pas. Exprimez-vous. Hein.
Is there any
On
artists
répondra à
out
tout.
there, maybe? Is there any artists?
Sorry.
Anyone wants to be artists or
Ah
a
oui,
student?
est-ce qu'il y a des gens parmi vous qui aimeraient devenir artistes ou qui ont l'idée? Mademoiselle?
What would you, do you want to work in comics or?
Well, je vais faire d'abord en français. Je peux la traduire aussi. Donc, ma question est un peu personnelle. C'est au début, quand vous avez commencé donc, votre travail d'artiste, de coloriste, est-ce qu'il y a eu des moments où vous vous êtes dit mon niveau est trop mauvais, j'arriverai jamais à progresser dans le milieu. Est-ce qu'il y a eu des moments comme ça de doute assez intenses?
Did I look like I understood
English.
that? I think it was a very intelligent question. It was a very intelligent question. I know that, but
Now, was there a time when you started out when you thought, I'm not good as this and I won't be able to be as good as the artist I like? And was there a moment of discouragement, which I'm sure everybody experienced when they begin?
yeah, I mean, I think one of the things I was told a very long time ago, when you want to become a professional working artist, you have to look at what's in the printed page on the printed page, and you have to do at least as good as what you see there. And any good artist should be hypercritical of themselves. You know, no matter who your worst critic is, you have to be 10 times harder on yourself. So I will look at Simon Bisley's work and I think, God, I wish I could draw like that. I look at my partner, Sally Jane's work, and she draws constantly. At the end of the working day, if I'm not paid, I won't draw anymore, which is very, very naughty of me. Sally will draw just because she loves drawing. I love drawing, but I love to be paid as well. So I never felt good enough. I still am pleasantly surprised when the editor rings me up and wants to give me work rather than giving someone else work. So I never felt good enough. I still don't feel good enough. If you manage to look at my book, I've brought some copies of my book over, which I'll have on display tomorrow. And I explain, one how you can get into the business, but also always being incredibly hypercritical of your own work. You can look at stuff and you know you've improved, and that's, for me, my book actually shows where I came from. So the atrocious drawings that I did in 1986 or 1980, I know that's well before you were born, but I was drawing stuff at 3 and 4 in those days. So I was like drawing stuff, and you can see hopefully my progression. And I had an exhibition in my hometown of Liverpool last year. And the thing that I found interesting for me was like seeing this work in a chronological sense, because the very early stuff, you're not going to translate this, are you? It's a very, very long
Je suis sûr que vous comprenez
answer.
tous. Hein. J'ajouterai juste quelque chose si j'en ai envie.
But what I found was like the work I did at the very, very beginning was atrocious, very, very amateurish, obviously. Then I got to a stage where I knew what I was trying to do, and it got pretty good. And then it got to a stage where people were paying me to do what they knew I could do, and it plateaued. It didn't go up anymore. It's like it started like that, and then I got very good for a period of time, and then people started paying me, and it plateaued. And then I saw I needed to try harder, and then it started going up again. And so yes, I mean I'm hopefully learning, and hopefully I'll be better And one day, I'm never going to say I'm good enough, but yes, no, I completely agree with you. Always be critical of what you do. Never feel that you've arrived or achieved exactly what you set out to do. Because the thing that I find is the facts like, deadlines are imposed on you. We went to lunch with a couple of artists earlier on, and we were talking about deadlines, and this artist had a deadline where he has to produce a ridiculous amount of pages a week. You can't do your best work if you have to produce that much work in such a short amount of time. And the flip side of that also is the fact that the money, if you paid very little amount, you're not going to give your best work. So to be a professional artist, the biggest problem is going to be the deadline that will stop you doing your best work, and then the fee that will stop you doing your best work. The thing I love about European industry, comics industry, you tend to find artists and writers, and hopefully Dave and I will be working on a European album sometime in the future, is the fact that it's usually you are paid in a different way. In American and British comics, you're paid a page rate, whereas in the European, and now it's slightly changing with Watchmen and other graphic novels, you get paid a royalty, and the royalty is the incentive. So, sorry to say this, but like a major incentive of what we do is financial. We don't want to be starving in a garret and having the publisher making all the money, and that's the way it used to be before Watchmen and Dark Knight and Mobius and heavy metals came onto the scene, and it became a completely different industry then. The thing that I'm always amazed about is how some of the great work was produced under those limitations, and to a certain extent, like Watchmen came out of that, but it still was quite restricted in a way, because the artist, the writer, and then subsequently a very long time later the colorist started sharing in the success of it. It changed the industry in a way that is healthy for young artists like you guys. I mean, you can start off with the labor of love, and it doesn't matter how long it takes you to do it, as long as you can do other things to make a living. You can actually produce something over 5 years, whatever, hopefully not that long, and then if you get it published, that's where your love will be shown on the page. And people, if you do it right, people will look at it and say, I want that, because you've achieved something so different, so individual. There's some brilliant stuff out there now that's being produced by 2 artists, writers, or whatever, who are producing stuff. And it's so original and so different. So yes, always try harder. Never think you're good enough. But I'm sure you're brilliant.
Oui, bien sûr. Je pense, pour rajouter, que tout dépend du contexte. Par exemple, la relation avec l'éditeur. I think there's the relationship with the publisher, the editor of the comic book. In the way, even if you have deadline, you can make great stuff, or you can make bad stuff if the environment is not, even if the money is great. If they push you too hard, it's a bit. It's a bit hard, I guess. So, c'est vrai qu'en France, on a eu ce truc pendant des années où les maisons d'édition soignaient les auteurs. In France, we have this great thing where people would work with the authors. On voit par exemple Métal Hurlant, où il y avait une relation incroyable entre Jean-Pierre Dionnet, l'éditeur, et même Philippe Manœuvre, et tous les artistes qui étaient dedans, qui ont produit with Heavy Metal. There was this Métal Hurlant. There was this great relationship with the editor-in-chief and the artist, which produced that best work, and they were well paid for it, even on tight deadline, même avec des deadlines très, très précises. Moi, je pense, dans quelle mesure, what is the measurement for you of, do you get into a project where, even if you think that the money is not as good because you like the project, is there an attachment? Est-ce qu'il a un attachement pour certains projets, même si parfois je dirais l'intérêt monétaire est moindre?
Well, that's Razorjack. Razorjack is my creation. I created it. I'm very lucky in a way because it's been reprinted a number of times. And I did the first Rage Jack story in 1999. I'd been in the industry for about 10, 15 years.
Donc c'est une BD qui s'appelle Razor Jack, pour ceux qui est moins connu, donc qui est une création que fait John, qui est sa propre création.
And I was starting to make a living, and I was enjoying working on Batman, Spider-Man, and Watchmen, and the other titles. And I love working with Garth Ennis on horror, John Constantine. So I really enjoyed the career that I had, but I felt I wanted to express myself, and Razor Jack was a way of doing that, which is my own character. And it took me a year, 18 months to produce the first graphic novel. And I probably spent somewhere in the region of, I don't know, £30,000. And so far, over the last 20 years, I think I've had about £2,000 back. So I didn't go into it for the money. So Rage Jack for me was the labour of love. And hopefully if it's ever made into a movie, or as I said, I'm doing crossovers with my favourite character, and there should be another one in the pipeline. So Razor Jack, my character, is going to be with Judge Dredd again, or one of the 2000 AD characters. So yes, the labour of love is something that the reason we get into this industry. You can't do comics if you don't love drawing, or if you don't love comics, you just can't do it. So the important thing is, one, you love what you do, and if you're very lucky, you can make a living doing it.
Est-ce que quelqu'un a une autre question, jeune homme?
Merci beaucoup d'ailleurs d'être venu nous parler en fait de votre parcours exceptionnel. J'aimerais vous poser une question en fait à propos des artistes amateurs qui n'ont pas encore trouvé une visibilité dans le milieu des artistes en fait. Quels sont pour vous en fait les plus importants conseils à donner aux amateurs ou à ceux qui aspirent à devenir en fait des artistes ou de futurs artistes, pourquoi pas de votre trempe en fait?
What advice would you give to amateurs who are trying to get into breaking into the business? When you're on the side, it's way.
Yeah. Yeah, getting into the business is one of the hardest things. I mean, any business is very difficult to break that first step. The first step to getting a professional commission. One of the things that I think has changed is the internet. Now you can get your work out to thousands of people, maybe millions of people if you're lucky enough, and some amateur artists have managed to do that, I think.
Oui, l'Internet permet, par exemple, aujourd'hui, c'est une des choses qui a changé, on peut mettre ses dessins en avant.
And I found, like, when my first full year as a comic artist was 1986, and that was the first year I actually made all my income from comics.
Donc c'est en 1986 uniquement qu'il a commencé à gagner tout son argent des comics.
And I found that I was told, I don't know where I read it, but I read somewhere that there was only something like 500 full-time working professional comic artists in the whole world.
How much?
500.
Alors, apparemment, that was at the time.
Yeah, I don't think it's changed.
Apparemment, à cette époque, il y avait seulement 500 artistes de comics qui gagnaient leur vie en dessinant des comics.
And the reason is, most comic artists have other jobs. So to actually make your living full-time as a comic artist, it's a very small number of people.
Oui, beaucoup d'artistes ont un autre travail et ceux qui arrivent donc à vivre à 100% en dessinant sont obligés de s'y consacrer totalement et ils sont moins nombreux.
So you're one of quite a few people who are working in something that you love.
So you're wondering?
He's one of quite a lot of people who's doing what he loves, working in or producing comic art. So.
Yeah, I don't get what you were saying.
Yeah, what's going to happen is like.
So you have to get into, you have to struggle even though you.
Yeah, I'm afraid you have to struggle.
I mean,
but the great thing is you're doing the right thing. You're actually coming to events like this. You're coming to comic conventions. the best way for anyone to get into the business is to come to comic conventions, talk to professionals, talk to your fellow artists and writers.
C'est de faire des rencontres, par exemple, c'est de rencontrer les artistes, les scénaristes, etc.
And
pour arriver
collaborate. Collaboration is one of the best things ever in our industry.
Parce que la collaboration est une des choses les plus importantes dans l'industrie. C'est vrai qu'en général, les artistes travaillent en couple avec un auteur, par exemple.
So to break into the industry, you actually are doing the first step, or you might have been published more than I know, but this is the right thing to do.
Donc c'est à toi de faire le premier pas et d'essayer que quelqu'un s'y intéresse. What I may add, ce que je vais ajouter, c'est que parfois 99 personnes ne vont pas trouver ce que tu fais super, et il suffit d'une personne qui dise ah oui mais ça m'intéresse, ou j'ai envie qu'on fasse un truc ensemble pour que la roue se mette en marche. Et maybe 99 people will say they don't like your art, but you just need one to say they like it, so that you can get into the business and the machine can get working.
Yep, that's a really, really good point, actually. When I first started, I was very, very lucky. I think, in a way, for you guys, you young people, it's going to be a lot harder.
Ça va être.
I was lucky when I first started.
Yeah, you think it's going to be harder for them?
Yep.
Bon, alors, ils pensent que c'est malgré que tout ce qui existe, ça va être plus dur pour vous.
When I first started, I could walk around the publishers in London or in Paris.
Quand il a commencé, donc il pouvait aller se promener
with my portfolio.
Avec son portfolio et aller rencontrer les éditeurs.
Nowadays, no publishers will see you. They all online. You have to go online to show them your work, and you're one of 10, 20, 100, 1,000, 20,000.
Oui, maintenant, c'est plus possible d'aller frapper à la porte d'un éditeur en présentant son portfolio. Il faut les contacter sur Internet, donc par email, envoyer des images que vous avez dessinées, etc. Sauf que vous êtes une personne au milieu de milliers, voire de centaines de milliers, je ne sais pas, parce que beaucoup de gens essayent de...
So when I first started going around with my portfolio, I went to one publisher called Futura Books.
Donc la première fois qu'il avait son portfolio, il allait chez un éditeur, c'était Futura Books.
Yep, SF Publishers. And the art director, looked at my portfolio.
Et le chef le art director, donc I don't know the word in France, but donc le responsable donc du département art a regardé son portfolio.
And he trolled me to my face.
Et il lui a dit directement.
He said, "This is the worst portfolio I've ever seen."
Il a dit que c'est le pire portfolio qu'il avait jamais vu.
So it happens to everyone. But
et ça arrive à tout le monde.
1 year later, this publisher rang me up, the same person, and asked me to work for him, and I said no. So.
Donc 1 an après, la même personne l'a rappelé en disant voulez-vous travailler pour nous? Et il a dit non.
It's really, really strange what we do, artists, writers, because we're like actors. We have to go to auditions constantly, and we have to be constantly rejected. Even now, I can go somewhere, and I won't be the right artist for it. So.
Même aujourd'hui, donc il lui arrive d'aller démarcher, et parfois qu'il ait des refus. Et moi, je dois dire, donc, puisque avec John, on a un projet de bande dessinée, I'm talking about la machine. C'est la machine infernale, donc qui se déroule sous la Révolution. Et j'ai démarché. So I did send a few emails. J'ai envoyé quelques emails avec des images que John a dessinées, with some samples that you did and stuff. Et j'ai pas seulement eu des refus, mais j'ai même eu parfois des propos très désobligeants, je dirais. There's one publisher who cracks me up. Je vais pas vous dire le nom de l'éditeur, mais il m'a fait. So he did this wall like 10 lines of saying that the project was crap. Donc il a mis 10 lignes pour dire que le projet était nul. Et à la fin, il dit at the end, he said, okay, he did the colors for Watchmen, but the colors are crap. donc à la fin, donc, il a dit oui, il a fait les couleurs de Watchmen, ton artiste, mais ses couleurs, c'est de la merde. Donc, vous voyez que même quand on est, even when you are already a non-knowledge artist, vous allez essuyer des refus, quoi. Et tout, voilà, je crois que c'est un mouvement constant. I think it's a constant struggle, et qu'il faut tout le temps être là, donc à rencontrer. Donc, si tu es artiste, peut-être rencontrer un scénariste, rencontrer des éditeurs, parfois juste sympathiser. Le réseau, as you were saying, knowing people helps a lot. Le réseau marche beaucoup.
I think the collaboration, that's one of the most important things. That's the thing I love most about what I do. Collaborating with talented writers, my partner, Sally Jane Hurst, my colorist. We collaborate every single day, which is just brilliant. She never listens to a word I say, which is bad, but that's okay. I forgive her.
Il collabore toujours avec ses amis tous les jours, voilà, échanger, et c'est brillant, quoi. So do you have some working project like would Alan and Dave get back together with you to do something entirely different than Watchmen? Est-ce que Alan Moore et Dave Gibbons auraient discuté avec lui de faire une nouvelle série qui n'a rien à voir avec Watchmen, mais just like reunite the team? Did you talk about it over the years?
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I love, as I say, is the collaboration. The thing that I like, one, I've worked with Dave Gibbons quite a few times since Watchmen. We've collaborated on a couple of other things. Alan has had this love-hate relationship with comics, and he said he will never do comics ever again.
Bon, Alan, c'est un peu Rorschach, hein. Il veut plus refaire il veut plus refaire de comics.
But Dave, we saw Dave a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about things generally. And I love going to my studio every day, sitting down and drawing. That's what I love. And I assumed, I've been surprised sometimes by other artists saying it's not necessarily the thing that they particularly like. It's actually quite intense and debilitating sometimes, because you're constantly criticizing yourself. You're constantly trying to achieve something that you feel you've not achieved. So I understand some artists not feeling comfortable all the time in the studio, whereas I always do. I don't know why, but I do. And I was talking to Dave, and I was saying, would he do more art? Will he do more projects? And he said, probably not. And I said, well, what do you do now? Because he does go to lots of conventions, lots of talks, and lots of events. As one of the creators of Watchmen, he's such a good raconteur. If he ever comes here, you have to come and see him. He's a very, very entertaining person. And I asked him what he does when he goes to conventions now, and he says he usually receives a Lifetime Achievement Award, and that's what he likes doing now, going to conventions and getting the awards.
Oui, Dave préfère aller aux conventions maintenant, et c'est plutôt son occupation principale. But I think he did write a comic book that you draw a few years back, right?
That's right, yeah.
DC Comics. Je crois que Dave a écrit un comic que John a dessiné il y a quelques années.
Yeah, that was really good work. I enjoyed working with Dave, but he's also written Kingsman with Mark Miller. He illustrated Mark Miller. And that's been made into movies. The thing is, once it becomes a movie, it becomes something else, and it becomes an industry. And to a certain extent, the creators, obviously, even though they initiated it, they're such a minor part of it. They only are. And then the rest, as you were talking about earlier, it's like the whole industry is a massive, so many people producing the work. But you are just down there sometimes, or you feel like you are.
Oui, c'est difficile quand donc un film est fait que le comics soit une part importante. But I think the way we want to work with nous avons notre projet qui s'appelle La Machine Infernale. We want the film to be as as constant as the comic book. C'est-à-dire qu'on veut on veut en fait que le film ait autant d'importance que la bande dessinée, que la série télé s'il y a une série télé, qu'un court-métrage s'il y a un court-métrage, que je vous appelle à venir voir. Donc ça sera à 17h15 dimanche soir à la convention Coming Gone. On fera une projection, donc c'est un cours historique avec Alexandre Brasseur. So yes, I think a transmedia project, c'est ce qu'on appelle les projets transmédia. It's way different than the way the industry is right now, because right now you have films, and films are really taking the control of, about everything. C'est-à-dire qu'aujourd'hui, même chez Marvel, finalement, le comic, c'est la cinquième roue, et c'est les films, c'est l'industrie du film qui dirige tout.
Yep, I agree.
So are we... Yeah, we still have time. Quelqu'un d'autre a une question?
Quels sont, I'm sorry, I don't speak, I'm not very good in English. Quelles sont vos références en... On entend là pour le coup. Quelles sont ces références graphiques à la fois dans le monde du comique et dans la culture graphique artistique? Et s'il lit des comics aujourd'hui, qu'est-ce qu'il lit? Est-ce qu'il y a des choses qui lui parlent encore aujourd'hui? Voilà.
What will be your graphic reference, the best artists that you like in comics, and do you still read comics today, and what are some artists who impressed you recently?
Yeah, I still read comics today. I look at the competition basically, and I think I'll break their fingers when I see them at the next comic convention.
Oui, il lit toujours et regarde la compétition, il fait attention.
I'm a traditionalist. Batman is still my favorite character, and DC are reinventing Batman every few years. And I think the sort of stuff that not Zack Snyder, the writer, who's this, the writer of Batman now? Something Snyder, anyway. Yeah, I mean, the sort of stuff that's coming out of DC, they use the best European artists and mainly like British and American writers. But there's some brilliant artists coming out at the moment. I just like look at on what's coming out, and sometimes I'm so impressed by these guys. It really is. And the nice thing is there's a lot of female artists as well coming into the business, and the great thing is people are judged on the art now rather than your gender, which I think is brilliant. There's a couple of French artists whose names escapes me. The guy that sort of like did Wolverine for a while.
There are lots of French artists.
Oh, working in America though.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's some really brilliant artists. I'll probably have to email you his name because I can't remember it just now. But the great thing about Europeans going over to America is we can still educate the Americans on how to look at stories in a slightly different way. One of the problems with American artists, and this is just a generalization, there's some of the best artists in the world work for American comics, and of any nationality. It's like there's a history of, to a certain extent, the Americans say they invented modern comics, and they have like a format that they stick to. They know it's successful, they keep doing it. And the Europeans come along and sort of like shake it a little bit, like Simon Bisley and Mobius and so on and so forth. They do things in a different way, and it's such a breath of fresh air. So I think what the Europeans do for the Americans is keep the American system of producing comics vibrant and valid. So I think the sort of artists that are coming out now in Europe will all if they want to work in the American industry, because we can take American visualization and learn from that. And it's like the way we produce comics in Britain before probably the 60s was done probably a lot more European. There's a lot of crossover. As soon as British readers started discovering superhero comics, we started to do things the American way, like Brian Bolland and so on, the people who grew up reading DC Comics. So just learning, and there's so much talent out there, and I'm really looking forward to the next couple of days to see the new talent. And the great thing is, like, you know, a lot of new talent is small press. In the UK, we have a lot of small press, you know, almost underground, people who are producing work like you, who's like, they can't necessarily make a living doing comics just yet, but they can work for small press, and they might not necessarily get paid, if at all, but the work will be shown. So it's a great showpiece for your work, you know, for all your work. You know, you don't get exploited. The biggest problem is if you go and create a wonderful character and it's original and new, never ever sign anything unless you understand what you're getting. Never sign away a character, because we've seen that happen to Superman, obviously, which is the classic story. It's like Simon and Schuster signing away one of the most recognizable characters in the world of comics. So always retain copyright.
Oui, parce que c'est important, si vous avez du talent, donc vendre votre talent, c'est une chose. Mais si par exemple vous écrivez vous-même les scénarios et que vous créez un personnage qui est vraiment un personnage intéressant, surtout ne jamais vendre, même si c'est difficile pour vous, ne jamais vendre à un éditeur les droits au tout début, parce que c'est ce qui arrivait à Superman, et les auteurs ont souffert. The authors, the guy who come out, Siegel and Schuster, they did suffer from it. Oui. Alors, merci beaucoup à tous. On va terminer.
Il marche pas. Merci beaucoup, David. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
J'espère que ça vous a plu. Donc d'ici quelques semaines, vous pourrez revoir la vidéo avec les démonstrations de John sur le site web de la BU. Et ce sera un lien vers une chaîne YouTube. Donc voilà, vous pourrez revoir la soirée. Si vous le souhaitez également, je vous invite à venir d'ici 1 heure en salle d'exposition de la BU pour l'inauguration de l'exposition La Société des comics. John et David seront parmi nous. Donc voilà, n'hésitez pas à vous joindre à nous. Et je vous invite également à prendre des programmes à l'entrée de l'amphi. Vous avez tous les événements en lien avec les comics organisés par les BU, des conférences, des ateliers et des projections. Voilà. N'hésitez pas à venir nombreux à nos événements sur les comics. Merci, au revoir.
Merci. I do want to thank you so much for allowing me to talk to you about my favorite subject, me. Merci. Okay.